book lovers. Welcome to the Lit Garden author series by booktrib.com. I'm Diane Parrish, your host, author of the column Lit Garden, monthly musings and book reviews for the thoughtful reader. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Rahla Xenopoulos, author of the book The Season of Glass. Rahla is also the author of A Memoir of Love and Madness and the novels Bubbles, Tribe, and of course her most recent book, The Season of Glass, which was longlisted for South Africa's Sunday Times Literary Prize. Her short stories have appeared in several anthologies, and she's written for publications including the Sunday Times, Cosmopolitan, Glamour, and Oprah Magazine. Rahla teaches creative nonfiction in the master's program as an adjunct professor at Manhattanville College, and she's led writing workshops worldwide. She co-hosts mindfulness retreats with Ruby Wax and Gaylong Tubten and speaks on mental health and empowerment. A fellow of the Royal Society of the Arts and a member of the International Bipolar Disorder Lived Experience Council, she lives in New York with her husband, some triplets, and their dog. Welcome, Rahla.
Thanks for having me.
I'm really looking forward to our conversation. I know you as my writing instructor, and I know you as a writer, but I haven't really had a chance to chat with you about other things. So I'm looking forward to that. One of the things I noticed in your bio is that you have lived a million different places. And I'm really curious about the path that took you from one place to another, basically all over the world, right?
Well, now I've taught in many places of the world. When I was a teenager, I lived very briefly in Israel. And then I lived in a city called Johannesburg in South Africa. And then we moved to a very beautiful city in South Africa, Cape Town. And then we spent a lot of time in London. And then we ended up in New York, where I would like to stay. I've got no intentions of moving away. I love New York.
I've actually had the opportunity to be in Cape Town.
Oh, really?
Just for a week, but our daughter studied abroad in Cape Town when she was in college. And we thought, well, that's an opportunity we can't pass up. So we took the family and went to see her there. It is an absolutely gorgeous place. So how long have you been in New York?
We've been here for 7 years.
It sounds like you consider New York home now and
Yeah.
would really like to stay there.
Yeah.
But still, even being here, you teach classes via Zoom many places.
I
Right?
do. And I taught for many years in Greece but just once a year. And now I teach twice a year in the UK. Once or twice a year, I teach a workshop there. And then with Zoom, it's fantastic because you get a geographic diversity. So I have different people zooming in from different countries, which is wonderful. It's so lovely to hear the different accents.
Oh, I bet. So, in all these different places, have you been writing and teaching from a very early age? Did you always know you wanted to be a writer?
You always hear about people, a lot of people I teach, they'll say, like, I started writing my first novel when I was 6 and I wrote a picture book when I was 9. And I do know so many students and colleagues who started when they were very young. I was very old, not very old, but I was immature. I started when I was in my late 30s.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, so I was late, and I would say I have severe dyslexia and ADHD, and I'm a high school dropout. So I really didn't think that I never thought I could be anything as lofty as a writer. And then a friend of mine was going to a writing workshop, and she said, "Please come with me." And I was like, ADHD, dyslexia, clearly I'm not a writer. And she said, "Just come and sit with me and be my writing buddy." The minute I put pen to page, I sort of knew I'd found a home.
That is so interesting. And what had you been doing up until that point?
I taught drama, and I was a waitress and I was a model and I
I can
worked in
see
a
that, yes.
laundromat. Thank you. I did a lot of boring things. I loved teaching. So I didn't teach writing, obviously, but I taught drama and I loved that. I truly love teaching. It's a homecoming for me.
Well, that's another thing that's very obvious. Being a student in one of your classes, I can tell that you really love what you're doing and you connect with each of us so specifically and so intentionally. It's a gift.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's a great thing to do, and I love teach. I love all the places I teach with. So I've been lucky, and I've been especially lucky that I've always had fantastic students.
Oh, well, that's wonderful too.
Yeah, because that can go wrong.
Oh, yes, I've been in many writing classes. There are a lot of personalities in the writing world, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So when you did start writing after your friend convinced you to go to this writing workshop and be her buddy or his buddy, did you immediately start working on a novel or did you start writing essays and short stories or how did you get into the field?
I started writing a memoir, and then I was very lucky that teacher was publishing a book of her students' writing. And I had a piece in that anthology. And then from there, it springboarded to a few short stories in different anthologies and in magazines. So, and then by the time I submitted my manuscript, I sort of had a reputation by then. So it was easier to find a publisher.
Oh, congratulations. That's wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah.
I've only read your most recent novel. I have not read your memoir, but your writing in that book, at least, is very visual. It's very cinematic. I don't know. I'm just making a guess, but I would suspect that your background in drama has contributed
Oh,
to,
maybe.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. I often think that writing is like method acting when you're writing fiction because you have to really get into the head of each character. And that is much like acting. And you do all that research into the characters and you spend all the time with the characters. So it is a lot like acting.
Well, you said something in class today that I'd never heard before, and I'm going to try it. When you suggested to us that maybe we spend 3 weeks with just one character, and I've not written that way. I tend to write scenes in the order I think they might end up in the book, and whoever is in that scene, those are the characters I concentrate on. But at just the time since we ended class, I've been thinking how helpful it would be to really know a character that way. Is that the way you write all your novels?
I think I'm sort of more character based. That last book was very plot based. Before I start writing a book, I spend a lot of time with the characters, getting to know them. In fact, in that book, my publisher, quite late in the day, said, "Let's change the structure. Let's put a period let's shift periods around." And I was completely freaked out because I thought I can't do this, but it proved quite effortless. And he said to me, it was effortless for you because you know the characters so well. So to shift them around, I kind of knew how they would respond to different time zones and different locations. So, and I think that a reader can tell when the writer has learned their characters thoroughly. If a writer doesn't know their characters well, the book is not convincing and it doesn't maintain our attention.
Yes, oh, 100%, I agree with that. I mean, obviously, the characters then aren't believable, and they do things that don't seem to fit with the notion that the reader gets of the character. 'Cause
Absolutely.
yeah, and you think, "Wait a minute, that person would not do that."
Exactly. Exactly. I often think of Dickens because and I love Charles Dickens so much, and those stories just maintain my focus and my heart beginning to end. But if you look at them, if you analyze a Dickens story, a lot of them have plot flaws. They have these, I don't know if it's flaws, but they have highly unlikely scenarios. But
Mhm.
we're so convinced by the characters that we just follow along. It's
Mm.
almost like we blindly follow because we'll go anywhere with those characters. And
Mhm.
in Dickens, it's also often with minor characters that he presents them as such multidimensional people that will follow even the minor characters will follow into the sunset.
No, that's true. I hadn't thought about it with respect to Dickens, but that is definitely true. What's your favorite Dickens book?
Great Expectations. I think it's because it was the first one I read, and
Mhm.
so much of what we love is about childhood and about when we read those stories. But I think it is my favorite. I think even if I hadn't read it in childhood, I would have loved that the most.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites too. I rather like Tale of Two Cities myself.
They're all beautiful.
They are. They're all quite incredible and so impressive. Even if we know he was paid by the word, it's fine. We like his words. We can live with.
Absolutely.
Is your experience being the mother of triplets, did it affect your decision to write about twins in The Season of Glass?
Yeah, I think so. In a lot of my work, I'm so fascinated by multiples. You'll find it with having grandchildren. They're different to other people. They operate differently. They enter the world differently because they enter with the world with a person, or with two, in my case, with two people. So they have a confidence that I don't know if that I never had that confidence. And I'm fascinated by the telepathy they have.
Oh, telepathy.
Yeah, so I'm frequently trying to figure it out. And the best way I have to figure it out is to write it.
Oh, that's brilliant. So, for that book, what came first? The idea for the plot, the characters? Did you have a notion about the world that you wanted to share with people?
The characters came first. The characters came first, and then they travel through time and through geography. So it was a bit of a fun trip, because every time I heard about a time in history that I really wanted to explore, I'd throw my characters into that universe, which was such fun because it involved so much research. I was working with a wonderful publisher. It was almost like a collaboration. And right at the beginning, there was a program in Cape Town where in the master's program, a student in the master's program could go and work for an author doing research. And I really wanted that. And my publisher said, no ways. He said, you will do the research yourself, and the story will present itself as you do the research, which was very true. I remember the Penguin driver used to come to my house every couple of weeks with a formidable pile of books. And then he used to say, watch this movie, watch. And I remember, like, even when I was writing about ancient Ethiopia, my family, we used to go at least once a week to an Ethiopian restaurant. I think my
Oh,
kids were so bored they were very happy for me to move out of Ethiopia and into the next place. It was very all-encompassing research.
that's so interesting. I started and abandoned a historical novel, and I was doing research. And in the class I was taking while I was writing it, the instructor recommended not doing that. She said,
Mm.
write the story, and then you'll know where your holes are and what you have to fill in terms of research. But that didn't quite work for me either. So I think when I do go back to this book, I'm going to have to almost do a simultaneous
Mm.
writing and
It's
research process.
that's Yeah, that's the way I did it. It was simultaneous. I was researching as I was writing,
Mhm.
and things would come up, like I'd find out about something in Vienna in 1938, and that experience would inform the rest of a part of the story. Or like, I spent time in Vienna, and while we were there, I was very aware of the architecture and of the cakes, and those insights really fed the story for me.
Oh, that makes sense. You know what that section reminded me a bit of The Hare with Amber Eyes. Did you ever
Oh,
read
really?
it?
Well, I'll take that. I'll take that compliment.
Yes, it did. I
Thank
felt
you.
yes, I felt very much in Vienna in both of those.
Yeah.
And I think it's wonderful that you got to spend time there. I advocate for spending time in every location where you're writing.
Oh, I would definitely do that if it was more available. But Vienna was the only one I went to.
Oh, you didn't go to Ethiopia?
No, I didn't. I think I researched Ethiopia the most. I spent the most time researching it. And of course, it was ancient, it was 10th century Ethiopia.
Yes, yes.
So
And you seem very familiar with the Torah.
I don't think I'm as familiar as I seemed. And tragically, I think I lost a lot of my brain is so adult. It was such detailed, kind of highfalutin and erudite information that a lot of it, sort of, as I finished the book, it went whoosh and came out of my brain. Tragically, I wish I'd retained more of it. But I did read a lot, and I interviewed a lot of rabbis and listened to a lot of podcasts. And yeah, as I say, I read a lot about the Torah and those influences.
I love this notion of you immersing yourself in podcasts and books and movies and having it just become a part of you
Mm.
in a way that influences the story. And then when you don't need it anymore, as you said, poof, it's out of your brain.
Yeah. I mean, I wish it wasn't out of one's brain, but I think it's too much to retain all that information. But I did find with each book I wrote, I found like even my children became immersed in the universe. I remember I was writing a book called Bubbles, and it's set in the late 40s. And I remember my son, we were sitting on the beach, and Mickey said, "Oh, well, that'll be just spiffing." And I thought, influence is too great. I've got to kind of keep some of this to myself. It's not fair on them. They all sounded like these little dolls from the late 1940s.
I like that too.
Yeah.
So, are you writing a novel right now?
I find that teaching my creative energy goes into teaching and into where I would be kind of thinking up plots. I'm now thinking up classes. So I haven't found it writing fiction. I haven't managed that, but I've been writing a book on writing. I've been
Oh,
writing a sort of it's part memoir, part exercise book. That's what I've been doing in the last year or so.
oh, that's a wonderful idea.
Mm.
I think we talked before about the book. I'm forgetting the exact title. It's Alchemy of Everything, something like that. That's that's a book that does something a little similar to what you're talking about. It's a mix of prompts and memoir. I love those kinds of books. Very different writer, but have you ever read Stephen King's book
I
on
loved
writing?
his book. I loved his book on writing. I've got it somewhere on this shelf. It was so generous.
So generous and so interesting that the type of writing that might not be a book I would necessarily reach for came from a mind that generous and organized and almost traditional. He's
Absolutely.
yes. So I know a little bit of the answer to this now after you explained how you came to the writing class, but when you are writing, if someone says, "Why are you doing this? Why do you feel the need to write?" And what will you share in your new book about why someone should even write?
Such an interesting question. I always say I think unwritten characters go feral inside your head.
Oh, they
And you
do.
don't want them living there. You really don't. I mean, I think we want our characters out of our brains and on the pages of books that can be closed. It was always a very liberating feeling for me when I finished a book and I could close it and say, now I've done all this work and it's finished. The way characters haunt one was a big reason why why I wrote. And I think the stories haunted me. And it's just such an adventure. Writing is such an adventure. You start in one place and you just don't know where you're going to end up. I always felt like if you can inhabit 10th century Ethiopia, why wouldn't you? You know, and even in a murder mystery, it's just so exciting to go into a different universe. And it's so all encompassing. So I think a
Mhm.
lot of it has to do with escapism.
Oh yeah, I would agree with that. We choose to write about characters who are a little bit like ourselves in a
Mm.
way of understanding ourselves. But I also think sometimes we pick characters or we're attracted to characters or characters come and find us is probably a better way of saying it, who are completely different from us. And it's a way for us to try to understand how do people like that function in the world?
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think it varies from book to book. I
Mhm.
know I wrote one book called Tribe, and that book, I think there were about six central characters, and an interviewer said to me, those characters were all a different aspect of Rahla, which really interested me at the time. I thought it was nonsense, but I've come to think maybe there was truth in it. So those characters I drew a lot from my own life and from myself. But then other books have had nothing to do with me.
Does each book take about the same amount of time for you to complete?
My first and second books were really quick. The third book was slower, and the fourth book was so all encompassing. And I think it took about 2, 3 years. It was a long write,
Oh,
at least.
that's actually pretty pretty fast for a book that involved that much research.
It was working flat out. I wasn't teaching at that point.
Okay.
So it was working flat. And my kids were a little bit older, so they were a little bit more independent. And
Mhm.
I was just writing.
I'm trying to imagine writing a word with triplets running around. I can't do it.
It was, it was, when they were babies, I remember writing on the page, and you know how when they're babies, they kind of vomit up milk. And I remember one of them vomiting up milk onto the page and literally like taking a tissue and wiping it off and carrying on. I sort of wouldn't stop. And I remember them crawling over me on the bed and just typing as they crawled. I was kind of so driven in those moments to complete whatever I was working on. But they did, and they were in fact, I remember My son Samuel once was talking to me, and Tallulah, one of them said to the other one, "Oh, don't tell Mama that, she'll steal it from you and put it in a book." And I think one does that. Our environment feeds us,
Mhm.
and being the people I spend the most time with, they certainly fed me a lot. In
Oh.
fact, on the Season of Glass, there was one moment where the publisher said it should be more funny. You know how you have those notebooks where when your children are very small, you write down funny things they say? And I literally went to that notebook and just lifted things that my children had said and put them in the final book. And that I thought that made it funny.
I bet they liked that, though.
I think so.
Well, I was going to ask about your secret for balancing teaching and writing, but it seems like you almost do that sequentially, as opposed to trying to have a smorgasbord of writing and teaching at the same time. You tend to
Mm.
sounds like you tend to focus on one and then the other, as opposed to all the time, all of them.
Yeah, I'm so invested in my students and in their books, and I've become so invested in their characters. Like, I'm so interested to see what my students' characters do, that it's been difficult to focus on what characters in my own books would be. And I know, like, I would stand in the shower when I was writing, I would stand in the shower and an idea would come to me of something that in a plot or that a character would do. And now I'll be standing in the shower and an idea will come of a class to teach. So it just is a different focus.
Mm-hmm. What are you teaching next at Westport Writers? What's up for you
The,
next semester?
the same
Oh, the
classes,
same
the
class.
same, yeah,
Okay.
the
Yeah,
same.
I need to get
So,
into
and they can be used for memoir and fiction. I have students in the same class, as you know, like some are writing memoir, some are writing fiction, and I love that mashup. And I love that you don't always know whether someone's
Mhm.
writing fiction or memoir.
There's a lot of overlap there.
Yeah, there is a lot of overlap.
So, when you are writing fiction, or even when you're just teaching, do you read a lot of fiction?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, I always say I don't believe a person can write if they don't read, and if you read trash, you'll write trash. No, and I think there's a place for trash. I mean, I think that there's a very legitimate role that trash plays in our lives, and there are times in our life where we want to read trash, and I'm not snubbing it. I just think whatever you're reading influences how you write, and if
Okay.
you're reading a high quality of literature, that affects the material you put out. And I honestly don't have patience for people who say they want to write and who don't read. I just think there's an arrogance about that. And I don't think it produces good material. I think so. I'm constantly reading. Whatever period I'm in, if I'm with pirates in the 1800s, I'll be reading books about pirates in the 1800s. But
Hmm.
I prefer fiction to nonfiction.
Yes, I do too.
Oh, do you?
Yes. I have to sort of discipline myself to read a nonfiction book. I mean, there's some wonderful nonfiction books out there,
Absolutely.
but if I wander into a bookstore, I'm just drawn to the fiction section.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Are you reading anything fabulous right now?
I'm reading Orhan Pamuk. I'm rereading his book, and when that's finished, there's a new Nicole Cross, which I'm very excited to read.
Do you read one book at a time, generally speaking?
One book at a time, yeah. I don't have the bandwidth to read more than one book at a time. I admire people who do. Find my husband he'll be reading fiction and nonfiction simultaneously, and my brain is just, I can't think that broadly. I inhabit one set of characters and they inhabit me, and that's enough.
Well, that makes perfect sense. I sometimes read more than one book at a time, but if I'm really honest with myself, I don't think I maximize the pleasure out of
Mm.
either book if I'm jumping back and forth, unless they're very, very different. If I'm reading a novel and maybe a history of, Napoleon or something, and
Yeah.
those don't get mashed up. But to read two novels at the same time, I think sometimes I don't do either one of them a fair service, really.
No. I even find if I watch in the evenings, we watch a TV show and then we read. And it takes me a couple of pages before I remember I'm with new characters. So the
Hmm.
TV show has one set of characters and they're in one world. And the book I'm reading, the characters are inhabiting a different world. And I have to kind of shift my brain's focus
Well, that
from
makes
one
sense.
universe.
Do you keep up with like the awards, like the Booker Awards or the National Book Awards or any other way? Are there any books on your, I absolutely must read this book but I just haven't gotten to it yet.
No, I do. I don't really keep up with the awards. Listen to a lot of NPR and I take a lot of advice from them and I read what friends are reading. And I'm a member of a Facebook group called the Good Book Appreciation Society.
Oh, I like
And
that.
that group, it's lovely. And they have fantastic reviews and you kind of become aligned with certain people
Mhm.
that you read. And I always think if you read the same books as a person, it's the ultimate connection.
Oh, 100%. Yes, agree with it. So I want to ask you about something you do in your classes. I have taken not a lot, but several different writing classes, and you do something I've never encountered before. You have all of us write by hand, pen and paper, and longhand, and we spend a lot of time in class writing to prompts, less time commenting on each other's work. I really enjoy this format very much, and I wonder how you came up with it and what you find are the positive effects of teaching like that.
So a lot of the way I teach was copied from my teacher. I had a fantastic teacher. I always say she was the angel of my every word. So a lot of the techniques I got from her. And the writing by hand, I genuinely believe when you write with a computer, you write through your brain. When you write by hand, you write through your heart. And I think first draft should always be heart based. And also in terms of inner critic, like we all have an overpowering inner critic. I have yet to meet an author who has an inner critic sitting on their shoulder saying, "Aren't you clever?" We all have an inner critic saying, "You moron, who do you think you are?" So it's a lot of writing has to do with outwriting that inner critic. And I find a computer, because it's so cerebral, it really allows space for the inner critic. Where writing by hand, I always say you're writing a marathon and you're writing faster than the inner critic can catch you. So a lot of it is about abandoning the inner critic, the technique that I use. Because I think of all the discipline is a problem, but I think of all the challenges writers have, the inner critic is the most formidable challenge.
No, I would agree with you. And you're right. I've never heard a writer say, "Oh, I knew I had this from word one." It's
No,
just not in the
no.
vocabulary.
Yeah. And in fact, I had a publisher who once said to me, if a writer comes to me and says, "Boy, have I got something for you. I've got a brilliant book for you to read." He said, then I'm not as desperate to read it. But when I phone my writers and I say, "Come on, what have you got?" And they say, "Oh, it's a piece of shit. I can't give it to you." Those are the books that I know will be good. And I just think crippling insecurity is part of the art of writing.
Well, that's certainly been my experience. Did you find the same with acting and drama?
Not as much, no.
Hmm.
No, not in fact. I could go, well, that was jolly good. And you know that joke, how many actors does it take to change a light bulb? And it takes 10, one to change it and the other nine to say, I could have done that better. So I think acting is different in that way, where writers just don't experience that confidence at all.
No, not at all. No, I was on a panel once with a group of authors, and the moderators asked, "How do you know when a book is finished?" One of the other authors said, "It's never finished. Even when it's out in the world, there are still sections I would love to grab hold of and rework."
So true.
Mm.
So true that. And there is a certain wrenching involved. And I think there is a moment where you've got to say, "I release you." And the characters release the writer. Because I agree with that writer. It's you can carry on for years on the
Yeah.
same book. In fact, I worked with a writer who was she was in classes in workshops with me and I thought she was one of the most gifted authors I've ever known. But when it came to putting a book together, she just couldn't let go. She just
Mm.
she couldn't surrender the book to the publishers. And because she couldn't surrender it, I think when she eventually did, it felt open ended. Where I think if she'd been able to say, "I might never be satisfied, but I'm going to close here," she would have closed. Where the way she did it with them banging the door down and snatching the manuscript away from her, it wasn't as brilliant as her writing should have been.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Mm.
Is that something you can teach someone how to know when it's time to stop printing pages, stop revising, and say, this is a completed project, even if it isn't perfect? Is that something that can be taught?
I don't know. I think it goes so much back to insecurity. And I always say to my students, and I used to say to myself, it's not my job to like it, it's my job to write it. And there is a point where if you're being completely brutal, you have to relinquish. But I think it's instinctive.
Well, that's great advice. I was also wondering, I love that advice. Is there any other advice you pass along to your students that you wish someone had maybe mentioned to you when you were first starting out in this world of writing?
It's such a good question. And I know that the minute I close the screen, I'm going to come up with a million answers. But now I don't think so. I think if you can't believe in yourself, trying to believe in your own words is such a formidable challenge, and it's worth aspiring to. And I think also there's that thing of saying, this isn't me, this is of me. It's an aspect of who I am. So that when you finish it, you can release it with more abandon.
I love that advice. It's not who I am. Oh, that's wonderful advice.
Thank you.
Of all the characters, and there are a lot of characters in the Season of Glass. Of all the characters you've created, which one would you most like to sit down and have lunch with in real life?
Wow. No one's ever asked me that. Um, wow. I think the Queen of Ethiopia, I think, and the Queen of Sheba. Those the antiquity really fascinated me, and the fierce feminism of those characters really. I loved writing them because I just so loved doing the research and learning about them. So if I was going to have a dinner party, I'd want to have it with them. I would really have wanted to sit and rack their brains and find out there. And of course, can you imagine putting a 10th century queen into contemporary New York? I would love to know what they feel about life and what they feel about the way the world has gone.
Oh my goodness, their observations. If you do this, invite me to this
I
conversation.
will. I will.
So this you may have been asked before, but I'm always curious. If you were limited to one book on a deserted island, just you and a book, is there a book you think you could live with for a year?
Yeah, I think The Great Gatsby.
Oh, I love that book.
Yeah, I reread every time every time I was starting to write a new book myself, I would reread that just because aspirationally, the quality of writing is just out of this world.
Out of this world. Out of this world. Last year was the 100th anniversary
Yes.
of the book. So I reread it for whatever, the 8th time maybe, in honor of that. And I feel every time I read it, I'm further impressed by what he accomplished. It
Mm,
is a brilliant book,
mm.
and so few words to achieve that brilliance.
Incredible. There's no verbosity. Absolutely. There's a limited wordmanship, not a word wasted.
That's a goal. That's an aspirational goal
It's a goal.
for writers. Yeah.
It is a goal.
Hmm. So for my last question, describe for me your idea of the perfect day.
Perfect day. Okay. So I wake up and I drag myself to yoga. Um, that's the first thing. And then I teach a class, and then I have a slice of cake because I skip breakfast, I skip lunch, and I have cake instead. Um, and then I would hang out with my family, and it would be summer. My perfect day is always in summer, and I would hang out with friends. And then my favorite thing to do is to have supper with my family, and then to crawl into bed and watch a TV show, and then to read a big chunk of books. So I think that would be my perfect day.
That sounds pretty perfect. Well, thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
to talk with me today. I really enjoyed our conversation, and you've given me a lot to think about and some wonderful tips. Of course, I'll see you next Friday in class.
Yes, I look forward. It was a joy chatting to you in this forum.
Thank you.